With Metal Sonic being the final vanilla character we needed to cover in this miniseries, and with a fair amount of spare time on my hands, I decided that, for once, I'd actually get footage of a full SRB2 playthrough with him. I usually spend about an hour with every character I cover on this channel, but I only ever record about 20 to 25 minutes of footage for each of them, so as my videos are getting longer, I'm needing to repeat more and more footage. Of course, with that plan in mind, the Universal Laws of Slapstick Comedy or something decided that this would be the perfect time to screw around and not record everything from Greenflower Mountain up to the Arid Canyon Fang boss. It's fine, I'm fine, it just means that all the stuff I talk about today doesn't have its corresponding footage, but that was like it was before, and I managed fine. Guess I'll stick to that original 25 minutes of footage, just play the video.
Play OBS, I can't do this. Please, just stop doing this, why?
Despite that minor setback outside of his control, I'm very happy to say that, out of the box, no beating around the bush, I liked Metal Sonic's moveset significantly more than Fang's. He is the pinnacle of the speedster archetype that Sonic and Amy Rose both fall into, taking it to its logical extreme to act both as an easy and hard mode for the class. Sonic exists as the moderate version of this, with high speed, a horizontal travel ability that helps in-game momentum and avoid platforming, but without the control and verticality other characters commanded. Amy Rose is a weaker version of this trope, with less speed gaining abilities and a vulnerable jump making her the de facto harder Sonic, but she balanced that out with more explorative abilities and some more verticality. Metal Sonic is the hardest to compose this character philosophy before it begins to fall into borderline unplayable absurdity. He is far and away the fastest character on the roster once you get to grips with SRB2's level design, and he has a really powerful ability that can help him take plenty of clever shortcuts with a bit of finesse. But that speed can also make him a really difficult character to play, with a high skill floor only matched by the obscenely high skill ceiling that he possesses. To achieve that, Metal Sonic has two abilities outside of his standard jump and spin, as we've once again returned to the world of automatically damaging jumps and the ability to enter small spaces, thank God. What that does mean is that one of these abilities is a passive one, the first and only on the vanilla roster. Unless you count Knuckles' ability to smash certain walls as passive, as you don't need to actually do anything to perform that. But at the same time, are you really going to pull out an actually on that sort of level? This passive is the boost mode, something that anyone familiar with the modded side of SRB2 is well acquainted with, seeing as almost every mod feels the need to implement this regardless of how well it actually fits. But it's actually fairly unique amongst the vanilla roster, as it breaks some of the pre-established rules that have remained constant with every other character on it. So far, every character's had more or less the same top speed and acceleration. I don't have exact stats, so that is admittedly based more off feelings than anything else, including Metal Sonic in his standard movement form. What Boost Mode does is effectively, once you reach top speed and so you can maintain it for a while, cause Metal Sonic to step into overdrive, settling into a new posture, summoning an electrical aura, and actually shuffling the speed and acceleration stats around. Entering boost mode doesn't immediately cause you to fly off like some sort of bottle rocket, but instead it reduces your acceleration drastically before allowing you to reach a much higher top speed. I once again don't have the exact statistics, but from what I can gather, it seems that the top speed in boost mode is somewhere between 3 to 5 times more than anyone else on the roster, which, when you take into account the fact boost mode also allows you to destroy spikes and tear through Bannex, along with its synergy with your other ability, isn't actually that impossible to reach on some levels. Of course, it does require some skill to use, along with some contextual luck with where you happen to activate it, as there are plenty of levels and areas where there simply isn't enough uninterrupted forward motion for you to reach that point. It can also be a bit fickle with staying active, because while you can continue to accelerate when using it, the moment you lose any speed, it will cut out and drop you back to your usual top speed. In theory, anyway. In practice, you can sometimes hit a wall and still recover in a way where your boost mode doesn't drop out, but there'll be other times you turn a corner too sharply or slightly clip an edge, and you'll immediately cut out. That doesn't annoy me too much though. I recognise that it all comes down to my skill and general clumsiness, as this can be avoided by just taking corners more gently, or better avoiding obstacles. And again, the game doesn't really expect you to stay in boost mode for too long unless you're especially skilled, as it is ultimately untenable to think about keeping it in a lot of platforming sections. But man, those few seconds where you're travelling several times over what you would otherwise be doing with any other character, it is an exhilarating feeling, unmatched by much else, in this game or in others, truly showing the potential SRB2 has and perfectly encapsulating its strong points. The boost mode by itself would make Metal Sonic an exhilarating character to play as, but he'd undeniably be a difficult one to even begin to play as. He'd simply be too fast, and without another ability to compensate, I can imagine there'd be plenty of overshot jumps and boost mode cutouts where you need to awkwardly transition into a slow paced area. Luckily, Metal Sonic does have another ability, and it has incredibly strong synergy with the boost mode, far more than say Fang's Gunslinger and Tail Bounce has. I'll take any opportunity to dunk on Fang, just watch me, this will be the channel's running joke. It's the hover, and it's the primary reason why I think Metal Sonic is strangely both an easier and harder version of base Sonic. Essentially, think of the Thok. What would you say was its greatest weakness? Do you think it just drops too quickly? That's great. Now imagine if it didn't drop at all. That is the hover, which keeps you at a steady height for as long as you hold the jump button once in midair. Alright, it can drop and cause you to begin to fall, but only if you're bad at the game. Losing too much speed will cause you to slowly drop, but it's really not too difficult to regain the speed necessary to level it back off again, even if you for whatever reason completely stop. If you decide you want to drop in a more controlled manner that doesn't require you to lose speed, letting go of jump and then holding it again will actually cause you to re-enter the hover, which can be repeated as many times as is needed to reach the perfect height, as long as you don't need to somehow go up, as there's no way to do that. But how does this synergize with boost mode? Well, reason one is that boost mode doesn't cut out when hovering as much as it does when on the ground, because you can keep dash mode during your hover, and yet you can also still seem to turn and even hit walls and still keep it active. It also allows you to avoid those pesky slow-paced platforming sections, as the hover is more than capable of entirely ignoring them and flying right past, though this is admittedly just always useful, boost mode or not. Finally, it's simply safer in the sky than it is on the ground. Boost mode might be able to tear through spikes and rip apart badniks, but you are still vulnerable to more permanent obstacles, like walls, or level decoration, or other level dangers. Hovering allows you to simply ignore and fly over all of this, never compromising your boost mode and giving you some more leeway to turn corners, as you can worry less about deceptively sharp ones. Overall, Metal Sonic easily has my favourite moveset in the vanilla game. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, I'm crap at the game, can barely keep my boost mode active for more than a few seconds and constantly run into walls, yet even I could still pull off a few really interesting shortcuts, despite Metal Sonic not necessarily having his own character specific routes. I had some really cool ones in Arid Canyon where I took advantage of dropping out of and re-entering the hover. If only OBS recorded my footage when I inputted my record hotkey. Those few seconds where I can keep up dash mode, especially at higher levels where you're 4 times faster than you should be and can barely make it around a corner, simply can't be replicated anywhere else, and Metal really enjoys that level of polish that, despite dozens of modded characters effectively just having this moveset, very few of them can actually say that they reach. I honestly don't think this can be improved in any significant way. Any complaint I or anyone else has with it can be dismissed justifiably in 99% of cases with a mere skill issue. Get good, you might say. If I was better at playing him, Metal Sonic could easily have netted a 10 here, which would put him in an even more enviable position at the end of this video, but on my ranking scale, a 9 is still effectively perfect. Watch Sonic Team Jr. decide to buff this guy even more in the pats, and then decide to put even more obscene limits on Fang. It's going to happen, I'm telling you. Right, slight tangent here, but I have to say that the Sonic series has some absolutely incredible robot designs, some of my favourite in all of media, and robots populate most of the top spots on my favourite Sonic characters list based almost entirely on their designs. Omega is my favourite character, and it is criminal he doesn't have an SRB2 mod, and then I will admit it's Silver and then Blaze, but then it's Metal Sonic, Gemroll, Sard, Mecha Sonic, Emerald, so my point still stands. I especially like how, and SRB2 absolutely nails this, classic Metal Sonic has always felt like Sonic's sorter, younger, edgier, try-hard of a brother, feeling just a little sorted despite actually being the same height and perpetually being pissed off. It's incredible just how much emotion the sprites have put into a character that not only does not emote, but doesn't even have all that much body movement in the moment to moment. He just looks extremely ticked off at all times, regardless of the circumstance, yet he does still emanate an aura of being some highly skilled assassin you really don't want to get in the way of. Even when getting damaged or riding the rapids in deep sea, the point that even the other cool characters on the roster drop the act and look scared, yet Metal Sonic simply looks like he's been mildly inconvenienced and is just taking the hit ready to counteract is great. Even dying just causes him to shut down, rather than the weird goofy face everyone else on the roster pulls off. Animations wise, they're all great, but the standout one anyone will recognise is his famous taunt animation where he wags his finger at you, which come out when idling. In other words, it's great for finishing off a boss fight, as it'll probably happen after staying on the animal capsule for long enough. Is it particularly in character? No, I always saw Metal as being too hyper-focused and efficient to waste time doing something like this, but it is a nice callback. He has a really attractive shade of blue already, which is actually the kind of tint I like to see on my modern Sonic, being that I started with Generations, and it only looks to be improving in his next sprite updates, with deeper shadows and his orange highlights looking more metallic. His particle effects are pretty good, but maybe the only thing I'd say needs a slight improvement anywhere in the character. There's three that I particularly noticed: his drowning, which I'd have footage of if not for OBS not recording when I told it to, his boost mode, and a trail that follows him most of the time. The drowning is fun, as instead of it being just a countdown like most everyone else, you instead get an electrical short-circuiting effect which slowly ramps up as he gets closer to dying. Doesn't make up for the fact that he's the robot and I maintain my stance he shouldn't need oxygen like everyone else, but whatever. His boost mode is fairly simple, just being a flashing red that overlays his sprites along with the change to his trail, but while it works, I'd hope it gets something more in a future update. If I remember correctly, I think it's X momentum that makes him more similar to the V maximum overdrive attack he often pulls out in boss fights in the mainline series. Just ask to use that, as it acts fairly similarly. Finally, we have a constant blue trail that follows Metal while he's grounded, and I initially wasn't a huge fan of this. You should have a trail, don't get me wrong, I just wasn't sold on this one. It cuts out a lot, it's quite distracting, and it is ultimately just a ball floating behind the character when it might fit better to have more of a flame or plume sort of thing. It was somewhat redeemed in my eyes though when I realised it actually subtly changes as you charge your boost mode, starting out as a white ball with a blue border, before transitioning into a white ball with an orange border, before finally snapping into the star thing during the boost mode proper. It's also really cool that it changes into a plume of bubbles when underwater. Nice subtle detail that adds a lot to the character. And that's everything. A lot longer of a review than normal, but then I had a lot to gush about here. I hadn't played all that much Metal Sonic before my playthrough for this review, so while I remembered I enjoyed him, it was a long time ago when I wasn't as good as I am now. After the tiny amount of skill development I've had in that time, I can say that he is definitely one of the hardest characters to master in SRB2, but that is his whole point, so that certainly isn't a negative. He's my favourite character on the vanilla roster, and definitely helps to wash out the taste of Fang's disappointment, with a great moveset, great sprites, and generally showcasing just why SRB2 is such a great game. I honestly don't think there's all that much Sonic Team Jr. could do to improve him in future updates, outside of some updated particle effects. If they really want to change Metal Sonic in some way, make it his boss incarnation. It sucks, please make it less of a chore and life drain. So yeah, he certainly deserves his 9 out of 10. It's a good place to finish off what has been a fun retrospective into vanilla SRB2, something I really hadn't played much of for a long time, and it helped me remember that even without the hundreds of great mods that add new characters, or fix tiny problems, or add new game modes, SRB2 is still hella fun. Here's to hoping it doesn't take another 25 years to get it over the finish line. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Watch out for the Alan Wake 2 videos I will be making regardless of how they so often bomb, and ciao.